So I figured that while we have some seeds, I can talk about some of the earlier stages of plant life. Here I have two different samples. Both are from the same species. These are not the pepper plants, these are tomato plants, but they start off basically the same. Here on the left we have a seedling that still has its protective coat on it, and on the other side it has its protective coat removed. There are two very special regions for these small young plants, and that is right down here at the base of the root and up in here around the leaves. These two regions hold special cells that are basically plant stem cells. They help grow the plant out and will continue dividing, growing up in the case of the shoot, and down in the case of the roots. Now, the plant does have a sense of gravity and it does know which way to grow. Down here in the roots, down here in the roots, right by the root cap, which is right at the edge of the root, there is a bunch of starch molecules, which are basically just a bunch of sugar connected together. And because those are quite heavy, they get pulled downward by the gravity. Therefore, the roots continue to grow deeper and deeper into the dirt, whereas up here in the shoot system, they don't have starch, so they aren't weighed down and are able to rise up into the light. Now, it's hard to see because the camera can't zoom in far enough, but on this left seed, you can see very, very small hairs, which are called root hairs because they grow on the roots and they look like hairs. These root hairs provide a lot of surface area for the root to absorb water and nutrients so that it can send it up to the leaves and fruits when it eventually gets some. Now, the root hair isn't found all throughout the roots. It's only found at the zone of maturation. Now I'm going to switch over to the pepper plants so that I can show you a bit of a bigger view rather than these small seeds. So that little green area that was on the right seed will eventually grow up into these. Now you can tell a lot by the amount of first leaves that the plant has. The cotyledons are found inside of the seed along with the nutritive tissue and the embryo that eventually sprouts out of it. So for our flowering plants, also known as angiosperms, they can either be dicotyledons or monocotyledons. What that means is how many leaves that the plant first has. In our case, with both the peppers and the tomatoes, they are dicotyledons because they have 2 leaves. I don't have any monocotyledons around. Now you can tell a lot by just these first 2 leaves. The vascular tissue in dicotyledons is circular and uniform, whereas in the monocotyledons it's pretty much all over the place, all throughout the stem, but in these it's mostly around the edges in a nice big fancy circle. You can also tell that the true leaves, which these are not, these are embryonic leaves, but the true leaves will have branching veins and not a bunch of parallel lines. Also, the flowers that it will sprout will be in multiples of 4 or 5, rather than in monocotyledons, they only have flowers that come in multiples of 3. So you can get a pretty good idea of what the mature plant will look like, at least, by just these few little beginning stages of the plant. Now, it's kind of hard to see the top apical meristem on the smaller plants, but perhaps here it might be a little bit easier. If I zoom into this far one over here. So it's still kind of hard to see, but if you split the leaves right here, there's like a little small cone shape in there, and that is the place where pretty much the entire plant's going to grow out of. It's going to grow up, and it can produce lateral buds or axillary buds, which branches will come off. But this one will continue to just go straight up. I just want to point out the true leaves that are now emerging out of the pepper plants. You can see how different they actually look. These are the embryonic leaves, and these are the true leaves up here. These ones are much more rounded and a lot larger and greener, more flat. But these ones have a little bit more texture to them, and they're a little bit lighter. So as these ones grow up and the plant is able to survive on these new true leaves, the embryonic leaves will start to fall off and, well, die because they don't need them anymore. They aren't as good as the true leaves. You can see that on these sunflower plants how big these true leaves have become. These embryonic leaves down here used to look huge. They used to look something kind of like this. But now that all that energy is being transferred up to here into the vertical growth and growing out these true leaves, these have begun to shrink and they don't get the nutrients that they did when they first were growing up. But that's pretty much all I have to say about these small little young plants. And probably in about a month or 5 weeks, they should be ready and the outside should be warm enough for them to actually be transplanted outside where they can produce their fruit and we can hopefully cross them, which might be a little difficult considering these are all self-pollinating. But I'm thinking if I can get the jump on that, I'll actually be able to cross-pollinate some of them and maybe get some decent results out of it. But yeah, that's all I have for this episode, so see you next time.